WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. We're 2 months past the 2024 elections, and that means it's time to start thinking about what our new state leaders will be tackling in 2025. North Carolina doesn't just have a new governor. In the state legislature, Republicans will have a new Speaker of the House, and Democrats ousted their leader in the state Senate, too. It all comes as 2025 will bring plenty for the legislature to tackle, from Hurricane Helene disaster aid to a new state budget and lots more, maybe even medical marijuana. WRAL State Government Reporter Will Doran has a new article out that breaks it all down. He joins us now. Will, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the top priorities for the state legislature. When are they coming back to Raleigh, and what will they be focusing on?
Yes, they'll be back this spring. We don't know exactly yet, but usually March or April they come back. And the first thing to get started off traditionally is the new state budget. The way things work here in North Carolina, we write budgets for 2 years at a time. So they've got a lot of work to do. It's probably going to be yet another record-breaking budget, billions and billions of dollars to divvy up between everything in state government. That's going to take a lot of work, and a huge part of that is going to be the Helene efforts and figuring out not just how much money to put towards Helene relief in Western North Carolina, but how to do it, what sorts of things to prioritize, the strategies of kind of whether you wait to see if the federal government is going to do something or if you just decide, hey, the feds are taking too long, we need to just take care of this ourselves. So all of that, could lead to a lot of debate. We're just going to wait and see. But those are going to be the two big things. Obviously, we're going to get plenty of policy debates as well that crop up. But money is always the big thing.
Right. And of course, in general, Helene relief, I would think, isn't really political, right? I mean, everybody agrees we need to help Western North Carolina. It's maybe the how much do we have to do that question. But you have reported that there's been some political disagreement over those exact details.
Exactly. Governor Roy Cooper, former Governor Roy Cooper, I should say, had suggested spending just about $4 billion in relief aid. He outlined a whole detailed plan. Republicans didn't really consider that plan ever. So far, they've spent about $1 billion, so only about a quarter of what Cooper has suggested. A big part of that that Cooper had wanted to spend that the legislature hasn't really spent yet is on specifically housing, which typically is something that the feds are in charge of. But people who have been paying attention, WRL has had a documentary on how bad North Carolina's response has been to some past hurricanes. Florence and Matthew, and getting money to people there. I mean, it's taken years and years for homes to get rebuilt in eastern North Carolina. So Cooper had said, look, we need to go ahead and get some money in here to kickstart things. The legislature really hasn't done much with that so far. Another big question has been how to help out small businesses in Western North Carolina, and just how do you stop the economy from just cratering out there? And the Republican strategy so far has been to talk about loans and giving out loans. And Democrats and even a few local Republicans who are from Western North Carolina say loans aren't going to cut it. A lot of these businesses just took out loans during COVID a couple years ago. They're still paying those back. We need just grants. We need the state to not expect to get this money back. Just, give it to folks so that they can keep people employed. We don't have, high unemployment out west or people who just leave those communities because businesses are shutting down and they need to find work. So they're going to, move to Charlotte or move to Raleigh or whatever. What can we do to help those communities stay together here in the next couple of years? Because this is not going to be something that takes just a few months to deal with Hurricane Helene. This is going to be years long. And those disagreements are real disagreements on how to best handle this and move forward that we'll be hearing for probably years.
And while we're talking about money, you've also reported that there could be big changes debated for one of the state's biggest industries, which is healthcare. What changes are lawmakers looking at there?
Yeah, there are a few major issues in the healthcare arena that have been kind of tossed around for years, and there's been some minor changes that have been passed, but in general, nothing big has happened. There's going to be another push for all of these again this year. One of them is this thing called the SAVE Act. Nurses have been pushing for it hard. Basically, it would allow nurses with advanced training called APRNs to take on more duties that currently can only be done with a doctor's supervision. And they say the doctor's supervision isn't really real. We don't need it. This is just something that, doctors have to get paid more money. And we think that we could, expand healthcare access, especially in rural areas where it's really hard to find a primary care doctor. There's plenty of nurses in rural areas, even if there are not plenty of doctors. And so they said, we think, this could help expand access. Doctors have been fighting hard against it because, they might lose some money if this passes. And also they think it could be dangerous for patients. They say, look, yes, these nurses are trained, but they have not gone to years and years and years of medical school like we did. And so that has been a big political fight. There's also something with billions of dollars in implications called certificate of need reform that is actually something the state Supreme Court is taking a look at. And that basically has to do with how much competition is allowed between hospitals and doctors. Big money, big lobbying, and, something that can often not break down directly along party lines, Republicans versus Democrats. Very complicated politically, and we're going to see a lot more fights.
Okay. And then there's medical marijuana. Now, that's something that the legislature has been talking about for a few years now. I feel like almost every session it gets brought up at least once. Is there any reason to believe it might actually pass this time?
Yeah, the headline every year is, medical marijuana bill goes up in smoke.
You're right.
Because, we have a Republican-controlled legislature here. And, it might surprise some people, but the state Senate for several years now has passed medical marijuana legalization. And it's being promoted by one of the most powerful Republican state senators, who is a cancer survivor himself, has talked about his own illicit use of marijuana while he was dealing with chemotherapy. And it's just something that he is very passionate about. He thinks that, most states have now legalized medical marijuana. He thinks that it's something that can be really helpful for cancer patients, for treating PTSD, for example, in soldiers. We obviously have a huge veteran population here in North Carolina, for, a host of other issues. They have written it to be very strict. So this is not the kind of thing where you could just walk into your doctor and say, oh, my back hurts, and get a prescription for weed. And some people are mad about that, especially on the Democratic side. They think that the list is too strict. They think that there should be more uses for marijuana. But Republicans have said, look, we get it. We're Republicans. It's hard to convince all of our base that medical marijuana is a good idea. So we're going to keep this super strict. Democrats have been on board, even if it's not as open as they like. It's passed the Senate, but has been really held up in the House. It's going to be interesting to watch this year because we've got a new Speaker of the House. Tim Moore, who's been the Speaker for about a decade, is out. He's in D.C. now. He got elected to Congress, and he's going to be replaced by Destin Hall. So, how does Destin Hall handle this bill when it inevitably comes back up again? That's going to be something to watch really closely.
Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about some of those new leaders and what to expect from them. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. We're talking with WRAL State Government Reporter Will Doran, who's looking ahead to what 2025 will bring in state politics. Will, right before the break, you mentioned that we have a new Speaker of the House in North Carolina, Destin Hall. What do people need to know about him?
Yeah, he has been really kind of just steadily rising through the ranks of the legislature the last few years, but he is pretty young. He's 37 years old, and in a legislature where a whole lot of people are of retirement age, it's notable that Republicans have picked someone so young to be their new leader. But he clearly has the trust of the GOP caucus behind him. He's from Caldwell County, kind of out in the foothills, and he's a lawyer. Kind of a very typical, resume, except for, maybe you don't always reach this position in politics when you're only 37 years old. But he's got a big task ahead of him. The Republicans probably are not going to have a supermajority in the House for the first time in a couple of years. So, he's going to have to figure out ways to either avoid vetoes from Josh Stein on some key bills or how to defeat those vetoes by getting some Democrats on board.
And on the Democratic side, there's some leadership changes there too, right?
Yes. The state House leadership is the same, but in the Senate, they have actually ousted their longtime leader, Dan Blue. he used to be the Speaker of the House. Then he moved over to the Senate. After Democrats became in the minority in the Senate, he's been the minority leader. But Democrats there also wanted to go for a bit, younger blood, kind of like the Speaker of the House. They've chosen Sidney Batch, who is from Wake County. Just Dan Blue is from Wake County as well. And she's a family law attorney from the Holly Springs area, has been, again, in the legislature for several years now, not nearly the long career that Dan Blue has had, but kind of rising through the ranks. And it's notable she's going to be the first woman to really hold a top leadership role at the legislature here.
Okay. And of course, we've got a new governor in Josh Stein, and we've talked about him plenty on the podcast already. People obviously have known him for several years as Attorney General, so just stepping into a new role here. But how do you expect him and the Republican leaders in the legislature to work together? You mentioned the veto issue might become a big thing.
Yes. The relationship kind of got started off on a sour note. Before Stein was even sworn into office, the legislature passed a sweeping bill that stripped power away from him and some other Democrats who won election this year. So, not the greatest of terms to start off with, but we did see, Josh Stein, his very first action as governor was to go out to Asheville and sign some executive orders on Hurricane Helene relief. And it was really obvious that he had invited lots of Republican state lawmakers to his event with him. He really kind of wanted to extend an olive branch to them and say, hey, I know that this is about me, but I want you guys to be on stage with me, showing that, there is some bipartisanship to this. He created a new advisory committee on Helene relief to basically tell him, okay, what does the state need to be doing? And he made the co-chair of that a Republican state senator, Kevin Corbin from out in West North Carolina. So he's trying to kind of, make some inroads, not immediately start off fighting, but he's already in court suing the legislature for what he says are unconstitutional actions, stripping power away from him. So, I think it'll probably be a lot of that over the next 4 years, finding some issues that they think they can work together on, but also pretty vehemently disagreeing on some other things.
Right, and we'll be closely watching that court battle there. So what else should people be watching for in the new year when it comes to North Carolina politics?
Well, we're obviously going to have to watch national politics. All politics is national now. And so, if Donald Trump says something or does something that, really riles up the GOP base, the legislature is probably going to feel the need to react to that and, pass a law reacting to whatever that might be. Same could go for any other big, GOP names, Elon Musk, people like that, So, if you watch national politics a lot, there's probably a lot that the state legislature is going to do here on a local level to react to those things. And then there's also plenty of new faces, in the executive branch, not just the governor. We have a new attorney general, a new superintendent of schools who are both Democrats. Those are Jeff Jackson and Mo Green. They run big parts of state government, the Department of Justice, public schools, and how they interact with the legislature and how much the legislature does to kind of make their lives harder or easier in their roles is going to be really fascinating to watch over the next couple of years.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Will. It will certainly be a busy year in state politics. That's WRAL State Government Reporter Will Doran. To check out his new article breaking down some of the big storylines we'll be following in 2025, go to WRAL.com. I'm Grace Holland. Thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and for making us part of your morning routine. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. That's a daily email with Triangle news, events, and headlines to help you get ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.